Happy Thursday. I hope everyone's having a good day, a good start to your morning. Hope you got some fresh air, got some sunlight. I just came back from a nice little stroll, although it was a little bit cold, so I started power walking through that morning walk. I also started to feel a little bit of rain on me, so yeah, the sun that we had yesterday evaporated in an instant, but it is what it is. And then yeah, I was just gonna say like I've noticed something as I've been doing these daily live streams, and that's I have not had a haircut in a very long time. I mean, you boys can probably tell, but it's just not that great. I was meant to have one. I was gonna get one on Monday because was supposed to potentially have that date on Tuesday, but then once me and the Czech girl decided not to go for the date, I was like, well, there's no point in getting the haircut now. But I will get a haircut probably this week. Well, not this weekend because I'm coaching. I'll probably get one on next Monday because I'm going to Rome on Tuesday. So you guys will see me with a fresh cut for the first time in a while. I don't think I've had a fresh one since Kenya, but yeah, it's been a long overdue because yeah, I need to get that fade. You know, I feel like $1,000,000 when I get a nice clean fade. And my barber just got back from Paris, so perfect timing. But anyway, we're not here to talk about hair. This is not a barbershop channel. This is all about dating and cold approach. So, the topic for today is social anxiety. So, as you can see, I used to be socially anxious, but let me not forget. So, before I go into the topic, you can see the second half of the title, new Substack. Yay! So I have a new Substack, guys. As I've said before in some videos or some live streams, I love writing. It's one of my pastimes. I love it as a hobby. I could spend hours writing essays. And so I decided, let me start my own Substack specifically for this channel. So I've put a link in the description. If you want to subscribe to my Substack, you can just read my essays, read my articles. I haven't posted anything yet, but I'll be posting every couple of days. Obviously, it'll be topics related to cold approach, maybe a bit more in the game discussions. And because it's essay format, I have a lot more freedom and leeway to really get into the details and the crux of these topics, particularly around the philosophies of getting over your fear, ego, rejection, society, morality, all these different topics that I've talked about on these live streams, but now you get to read about them from a different sort of lens, let's say, because essay format's quite different to video YouTube format. So go ahead and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And otherwise, let's keep pushing. So, social anxiety. So I don't know if you guys would think, I don't know if you guys would be surprised or maybe you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine how that could be the case. But obviously, as someone who has a YouTube channel and I vlog in public and I code approach and I do all these different, let's say, socially intense activities and behaviors, you might think, this guy was anxious? Really? When? And so it's a good question. Honestly, I've probably been, maybe not now, sorry, I'm not socially anxious now, but before Code Approach, I would say my social anxiety really started around 13, 14 years old, and it just progressively got a bit worse. And it probably peaked around my second year of university. And there's so many different reasons why this was the case. I think for starters, when I was in year 7, I had this situation where I got into a fight with a girl and she punched me and broke my nose, and I was very embarrassed, and it became this whole ordeal, and it was quite a tough moment, and that made me a lot more self-conscious about, my own, let's say, reputation, and that certainly was the first time I became very hypersensitive and hyper aware about my social surroundings, right? I thought a lot about what people might think of me, how I might come across. Because imagine you're 13 and you get punched by a fucking girl. That's very demeaning, emasculating, embarrassing, humiliating. And it was something that was kind of a running joke for the rest of my time in high school. Now, I'm not here trying to play like a victim card or anything. I've already thought about this whole experience, and I'll probably talk about it a bit more in depth in a main channel video because it was a pivotal point in my life. But ultimately, I have gotten over it. And of course, I made fun of her. I shouldn't leave that part out. So I was basically jabbing her and I insulted her, and yeah, I clowned on her basically in class unprovoked because I was a bit of an asshole when I was a kid, as kids can be, right? So I put my hands up as well. And I can smile about this now because it was a long time ago and I've already processed it and I've already come to terms with it and it's all good now. But that was the start, I would say, right? And then after that, of course, the rejections that I've experienced, which I've already spoken about before, that added on top of it. And then when I went to university, in second year of uni, I was in a house with a couple of my mates that I met in first year. So we got a nice new townhouse in my university, and it was about five of us, and most of the guys in there smoked. They smoked weed, and so that was the first time that I smoked weed, and I was essentially, I dabbled a bit more into smoking a bit of weed in my second year of uni. And as you guys may or may not know, weed isn't good for you. Um, Hands down, I don't think it's great for anybody. So I don't do that anymore. I haven't done that in so long. But one of the downsides is it does make you socially anxious once you're off it. So when you're not smoking, it has this, let's say, withdrawal effect where you're a little bit more anxious, because I was taking it because it was a nice way to relax, right? Now I wasn't abusing it. I wasn't addicted to it. Nobody in our house was, to be fair. But I will say that because I was dependent on it to some degree, or I used it a fair amount in second year, I also probably caused some sort of social anxiety or some anxiety in general because of it, right? Once you're not smoking. And then in my third year of uni, I stopped going out as much, stopped socializing as much. In fact, I remember one summer between second year and third year, I literally didn't go out, barely went out the whole summer. So my family went to Kenya. I stayed in the UK to help with the family business. And my and the only time I went out was to either collect mail for my family's company, or I remember going to a festival. I went to Wireless Festival with two of my boys, which was around the end of August. So I probably spent, let's say, 5 full weeks not seeing anyone, not seeing any of my friends, not talking to anybody essentially. I would literally wake up, do a bit of work for the family business, and then watch Netflix. I remember I was binging Breaking Bad. I remember this. I was binging Breaking Bad, and I remember the curtains were all drawn during the day. I barely had any sunlight. And now that I think about it, I was probably not just anxious, but a little bit depressed. And maybe well, essentially what I'd done was I'd become a bit of a social recluse, because of me, the anxiety I felt at the thought of going out and seeing friends or going out to parties or doing any of that socializing was so high that I preferred to just detach completely and stay at home and just binge watch Breaking Bad and not go out. And I was just on that loop autopilot, right? And of course, doing that for a sustained period of time isn't good. It only makes your social anxiety worse, especially once I had to go back to university for my third year. And then in my third year, because I was so focused on making sure I got a really good degree, a really good outcome or grade, I decided to leave that house and I went to private accommodation where I got my own room and I didn't really speak to my flatmates. And so for that third year of uni, I was even more recluse, right? I still saw people. I still went out every now and then. I wasn't completely isolated, but I certainly wasn't socializing as much as I did in the first year or second year. And then once I left uni, I I went to London for my masters, and I was a bit more social there. And then I left or graduated with my master's degree, and then I started working, and it sort of improved around there because also that was when I got my first girlfriend. But after my breakup with my girlfriend, that's when it all went downhill because that was around COVID. And when was this? Yeah, so this would have been 2020. So we broke up just when COVID started, and I just moved into this apartment, which I, bought, and it's a two-bed apartment, and I was living alone. And obviously it was COVID, so lockdowns were in place. I couldn't meet anybody. I couldn't see family, friends for a couple of months. And I was just here by myself dealing with the breakups or the heartbreak. I remember I was so sad, and didn't really speak to anybody about it because I've always been someone who just kept my own emotions or my own struggles in and held them in. And I just dealt with it by myself. And I wasn't going out talking to people. So when I eventually started putting myself back out there, there was this heightened sense of anxiety. I remember when we first started going back into work, and I would take the train to central London. And this is how my social anxiety used to manifest. I would be sat in the train, and I wouldn't want to make eye contact with people. And whenever somebody looked at me, I would always assume that they were saying or thinking something negative. Like if I would be sat on the train and I'd be like looking, and somebody would glance at me, and I would just interpret their facial expression as them seeing me as like a threat, or seeing me as a ugly, or seeing me as a bad. I don't know. Like my mind was just in a weird place. I was not in a good place. And same goes for when I would go to parties or even go to work. I would always be thinking about what to say before I even got there. I used to always try and visualize myself having a conversation. This sounds crazy. I've never spoken about this, but here we are. I remember I would be so anxious about how would I come across in the conversation. And I'm talking about small conversations like saying good morning to my coworkers when I enter the office. And I would almost try to play out how it would go, play out the scenario in order to make it as easy as possible. Essentially, I was trying to predict it so that I could, not have to figure out how to talk on the cuff because I was anxious, right? I was anxious and I wanted to control everything. I remember even when I used to go out for walks in the morning, I would go out of my apartment and I would start around the bend because you go around the bend when you come out. And then as I'm walking to the park, because I live near a park, as soon as I saw a couple or I saw people further ahead walking in my direction, I'm not kidding, guys. My heart rate would slowly go up a little bit. I wouldn't get like crippling anxiety, or I wouldn't get this like super intense, discomfort, but my heart rate would go up, and I would almost, and as they got closer, I'd be thinking to myself, okay, like I'm gonna like, maybe say hi. Should I say hi? Should I do this? And I would typically just avoid eye contact. Just keep walking, keep looking forward. And I'm not kidding, if like making eye contact with strangers as they were walking past me, walking their dogs, I'm not joking, guys. Years ago, that was something that was difficult. That was difficult for me. It's so crazy when I think about this. Wow. I've not really thought about it too much until now. But yeah, that was how bad it was. And then of course parties, I mean, I needed alcohol to get out of my comfort zone to feel like I could socialize. So I remember I would, drink, a lot, get super drunk. And thankfully I was never a big drinker, so I was only a social drinker. So I would never, drink, like have alcohol in my apartment. But I would go out with my mates on a weekend, a house party, and yeah, I was the guy who would probably get a bit more drunk than the rest, right? Just to get over that anxiety. I mean, I remember one time, in fact, the reason I stopped drinking for about 3 years, so between 2021 and 2025, so I only started drinking again last year in the summer, right? Because I wanted to give myself multiple years of sobriety. I say sobriety as if I had an alcoholic problem. I wasn't an alcoholic. Don't worry, guys. I just, well, I'll tell you the reason why actually. So I remember having gone out a few times on weekends and got pretty pissed up. I remember one time I had a work event. So my old company, my first company, where I was a economist or economic consultant, I we had like a company event, and we were doing a joint event with another company that we collaborated with on regular projects. And so we had an open bar. We went to this nice fancy bar in West London, all drinks paid for. And I always used to get anxious about these events because you have to shake hands with all these new people, talk, make small talk, engage, make people laugh. Or at least at the time, I felt like I had to make people laugh. I felt like I had to sound smart. My bosses were there, but also my work friends were there. And there was all this pressure, and it was a lot. I did not like these events at all. I used to hate them. I would just wish that I could just get out as soon as possible. And so for this one, given that it was an open bar, that was a terrible, terrible equation. And I drank a shit ton. And it was a miracle that I got home, right? Because obviously I took the train into London. But I remember I took the wrong train, and then I took a train that went to like a completely different place, and I was super drunk. But then I got out the train, and then I found a taxi, and I was thankfully not too drunk to, not be able to enunciate my words. So I just told him to take me to this address, and he took me home, and I paid like £100, £100 to get home in a taxi. That's how far I was from my actual station. And of course, I couldn't go back on the train because it was too late in the evening. And I think even on that train, I must have had a situation where I just like barfed at some point. Like I don't remember much of the night, to be honest. And that was a tough night because I remember getting back here and sitting in my room, here in my room, like not too far from this kitchen. I sat there on the floor, hungover, and I was like, this can't continue. Right. And so this is one of those rock bottom moments again. And so, and to be fair, apart from the fact that I was drinking because it was a way to cure my anxiety, especially in these social settings, I was also not quite happy at my job, and I wasn't feeling great about it. And so and of course I still had the breakup, right? So I was still dealing with the breakup of my first and only relationship. I've only been in that relationship before. So all of that just snowballed, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to stop drinking. And so I hadn't drank for I guess at that point that was 2021 November. And so yeah, about 3.5 years I didn't drink. So yeah, and it's great because obviously, so once I stopped drinking, I also stopped going out as much. I went on to self-improvement, and my social anxiety, it was still quite there, it was still quite high, but I started to force myself to go into parties or events completely sober because I had to, right? I wasn't drinking. And at first it was uncomfortable, but over time I got better and better, and I had to get used to being myself, or at least trying to be myself and trying to be social without the crutch of alcohol. And I got more and more comfortable, right? I started to realize that, oh, when I go to these parties, I'm actually able to have some fun, even though I don't drink. And of course, I would leave early because I didn't want to stay there in the late hours of the morning when everybody else is super drunk. Because, of course, the longer you stay, the more drunk people get, the louder they get. And I'm introverted. Remember, guys, I'm introverted. So imagine an introverted, socially anxious, sober guy at a party. Like, that's not his best environment. That's not where he flourishes. And that certainly wasn't where I flourished. But I still wanted to push myself, right? And then, the years went by. And then more recently, so let's say the last 2 years, once I started pushing myself into trying to make new friends. So I went to more networking events, right? And I went to these coffee meetup events where you can meet strangers over coffee and you could chat and get to know each other. And I met new friends there, and we used to go and get pizza, go and play pool. One of my mates that I see here around in this area, I met him through that, and we played pool. We talk about football, we talk about business. Cool guy, right? That's when I started pushing myself to do these socially scary activities that demanded a lot of my social energy and would make me nervous. But I knew that getting over that anxiety was only done or only possible if I threw myself into, let's say, high pressure social situations. And yeah, that's what I did. That's why I did comedy improv. That's partly why I did comedy improv, right? That's another reason why I started Cold Approach. And Cold Approach was the sledgehammer that just completely smashed through my social anxiety. If I had to ever prescribe a cure to social anxiety for young men, it would be just throw yourself into Cold Approaches. It's such a powerful mechanism. Now, that's not to say that Cold Approach should be your source of socializing, right? I'm not saying use Cold Approach as the only form of socialization. Like, you should still be going out and seeing your friends, even if you've got a small group of friends. Go out and see them, do whatever you normally do with them, hobby wise. Still speak to your family. Try and talk to strangers every now and then. And when I say strangers, I just mean at the coffee shop. Have a bit of a chat with the barista. Talk to the bartender for a bit. Ask the old lady at the bus stop how her day's going. Just simple stuff like this that really adds up, guys. It really adds up. In fact, I've spoken about it before. I gave myself a challenge before I started Cold Approach. I gave myself the challenge of speaking to strangers every day if I could. I would go out if I was getting a coffee, and I would talk to strangers. And I have so many cool interactions with so many of them. I remember meeting guys. This one guy who was a doctor. I met him at a train station. I met this other woman who was a psychotherapist or a psychosomatic therapist for yoga. I met her in London. I remember meeting this other kid in a coffee shop near Waterloo where he was going to King's University and studying mechanical engineering, and we started talking about AI and internships, like all these cool interactions with these cool people. This is the kind of stuff I was doing to just beat the fuck out of my anxiety, and it helped so much. And that's why I was laughing at the start, because when I think back to how anxious I used to be and how closed off I used to be and how of a social recluse I became for so many years, to then look at myself now as I'm doing this live stream on YouTube, putting my face out there, doing Cold Approach, filming content. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And the crazy part is that I feel calm. I feel relaxed. And so to anybody who's watching, if you guys are anxious and you have that sort of underlying wave of anxiety that just seems to follow you everywhere, just know that it's possible to get over it, right? It's not normal. I used to think that it was normal, and partly because I also used to watch videos and YouTube videos, and a lot of people had the same issue. But just because it's normal, or just because it's prevalent in society, particularly amongst Gen Z and young people like myself, it doesn't mean that it's not curable. It is curable, and you just have to put in effort. But a lot of the time, like with so many different issues, the way to fight the issue is to go head first into the issue. So if you're socially anxious, you do stuff that exposes you to social pressure, right? If you're afraid of rejection, then you face rejection, right? There's no other way to do this. You can't theorize your way out of social anxiety. You can't theorize your way out of a shitty dating life, right? And I used to do this because let me not forget that. So I talked about how I stopped drinking alcohol, I got into self-improvement, but there was a period where I wasn't socializing as much, right? Like a year and a half to 2 years. And I was doing a lot of journaling, a lot of meditating, right? I was writing down a lot of stuff, trying to understand myself. And this was helpful for sure, but it wasn't enough, right? It wasn't enough to cure my anxiety. I still had to go out there and face the dragon. I still had to go out there and fight, right? And that's what I did. And so hopefully that's a hopeful message to you guys if you're a little bit anxious and you're not quite sure what to do. The truth is, you know what to do. You're just a little bit afraid, and that's okay. I was at that point too. And so just give yourself time, and you'll be surprised. The more intense you go, the harder you push, and the more consistent you are in terms of socializing and really getting yourself out there. Even if you're an introvert, let's not hide behind the introvert label. Even if you're an introvert, then you'll see a lot of progress, and you'll thank yourself later, because it's really hard to enjoy life and to enjoy the world when you're socially anxious. I mean, life is all about people. We're all about meeting people, forming new connections, forming new romantic relationships, meeting women, making new friends, talking to people, and even just existing. Like, some people find it tough to just exist in public spaces, to own space, to be seen. Like, if you're afraid of that, if that's a fear of yours that carries you around and is sort of like keeping you shackled, that is a terrible way to live life. I can't think of a worse way to live life. And so you need to really get over that, right? Because there's so much that life has to offer if you're willing to just be seen and put yourself out there and own your space. And so it's really important for you to sort this part of your life out. And I know it's so prevalent. There's so many studies about anxiety, and because we're so chronically online, we're spending less time outside, we're spending less time with our friends, with family. Everyone's just doom scrolling, and the social receptors or the social parts of our brain are atrophying. They're dying out. And this is very sad, right? So, yeah, hopefully you guys can get a move on. Yeah, don't fall prey to modernity and being online all the time. Put yourself out there, yeah, day by day, and it'll get better. All right. So on that note, I'll end the live stream there. Thank you for the like. I was seeing that there were no likes on the video, but I got the like, so thank you, brother, whoever's liking that one. To be fair, it's 10 a.m. Everyone's at work. I get it. But either way, it's been a good live stream. And yeah, like I said, I have the new Substack. So yeah, go ahead and join that link. I'll be posting my first essay today, and I'll be posting quite often. So keep an eye on that if you guys love to read, for all my literature nerds out there. But otherwise, have a smashing day and get through that anxiety, boys. You've got this. Till the next one. Peace.